If you love wild stories where justice takes unexpected turns and power shifts in the most dramatic ways, then you're going to love this one. Stick around to the very end, and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping tales that will make you question reality itself. So picture this: a quiet mountain town tucked deep in the pines, a place where you'd think peace would reign supreme, where neighbors waved at one another from porches and the scent of wood smoke curled through the air on frosty mornings, where deer wandered into backyards without fear, and where time felt slower, more forgiving. But lurking beneath that calm was the sharp edge of pettiness, pride, and an HOA president named Karen, the kind of woman who believed she owned not just her yard but everyone else's, too. The type who saw every wind chime as a noise violation and every wildflower as an unauthorized planting, a self-proclaimed enforcer of community standards, whose favorite weapon was her phone, always ready to dial 911 over the smallest of perceived slights. And it was her, of all people, who decided that I had no right to be at my own cabin, even though she had no idea that the land beneath her freshly mulched garden, the road leading to her gated driveway, and even the lake she liked to kayak on all technically belonged to me, because I didn't just own the cabin. I owned the entire county, every acre, every mineral right, every stretch of timber and creek and hill, and I was about to teach her a lesson she'd never forget, though at first, I stayed quiet, choosing to watch her unravel as her assumptions dug her deeper and deeper into trouble. It all started on a crisp autumn morning when I drove up to my cabin, a log-built retreat my great-grandfather had raised with his own hands back in the 1920s, a place that had been passed down generation after generation, tucked at the end of an old trail no GPS could track, yet somehow, Karen had found her way there, standing in front of my porch with arms crossed, her HOA badge. Yes, she actually had a self-printed HOA president badge gleaming on her chest like she was sheriff of the Wild West, and the first words out of her mouth were, "You can't be here, this cabin violates community bylaws," and I almost laughed because the irony of her trying to dictate terms to me, on land her very home sat on, was almost too much to bear. But instead of correcting her right then, I simply asked, "And who are you to tell me that?" Which set her off like gasoline on a flame, because apparently, she thrived on confrontation. She puffed up, announced her full name with exaggerated importance, and explained how she ran the local homeowners association that governed all properties in this jurisdiction, as though she were a feudal lord and I a mere serf daring to trespass, then told me I had until sundown to vacate my own cabin before she would escalate the matter. And when I shrugged and said, "No thanks, I think I'll stay," her face twisted into that all-too-familiar grimace of suburban tyranny, and she stormed off, heels crunching the gravel, muttering about how she would call the proper authorities, and sure enough, within 30 minutes, I heard the distant wail of sirens echoing through the mountains. Now, you have to understand something about these mountains. Sirens don't carry here unless they're close, and when 2 squad cars rolled up the dirt path, lights flashing against the trees, I knew Karen had really done it. She'd actually called 911 and reported me as some kind of squatter. The deputies stepped out, one older and calm, the other younger and eager, and Karen marched up with them, jabbing her finger in my direction like I was a criminal caught red-handed, shouting about how I was trespassing, how my cabin was unapproved construction, how I was lowering property values, and she demanded they remove this man immediately. But when the senior deputy turned to me and asked if I had any identification, I simply smiled, pulled out a leather folio, and handed over the deed, not just to the cabin, not just to the immediate plot, but the full county land ownership record, a stack of documents so heavy he had to take them with both hands. His eyebrows shot up as he flipped through, scanning page after page until he realized what he was holding, and when I leaned in and whispered just loud enough for Karen to hear, "I own this land. All of it." The color drained from her face, though she tried to recover with bluster, claiming that ownership doesn't exempt you from community rules. But that's when the twist came, because the deputy cleared his throat and said, "Ma'am, this man doesn't just own this cabin, he owns every parcel in this county, including your house," and the silence that followed was sweeter than any victory I could have imagined. Karen stammered, tried to laugh it off, but the deputy was dead serious, and I could see the young officer smirking as the truth sank in. Because suddenly, all her threats, all her calls to authority, all her smugness collapsed under the weight of reality. Still, I wasn't finished, because if I'd learned anything from living here, It was that people like Karen don't learn unless they're shown the full extent of their folly, so I invited the deputies inside, poured them coffee, and explained the history. How my family had quietly accumulated land for over a century, how logging rights, mining rights, and real estate deals had slowly shifted ownership until one day, my great-uncle realized we didn't just own a plot. We owned the county, lock, stock, and barrel, though we'd kept it quiet, preferring to let the townsfolk live their lives undisturbed, collecting small lease payments without interference, until Karen started making trouble, threatening eviction notices, even fining people over mailbox colors, not realizing she was harassing tenants on my land. The deputies listened, nodded, and eventually left, but not before warning Karen that filing false reports was a crime, and as their taillights disappeared down the trail, Karen turned to me, her tone shifting from anger to desperation, insisting she had no idea, begging me not to punish the community for her actions, and that's when I realized I held all the cards, because technically, I could evict her, reclaim her property, even tear down her precious wall if I wanted, and believe me, I was tempted. But instead of outright destroying her, I decided to twist the knife a little differently. I called a county meeting, summoned every homeowner, business owner, and official to the old courthouse, and when the room filled with whispers and worried faces, I stood up and revealed the truth, showing the documents, the maps, the records proving my ownership, and gasps rippled through the crowd as people realized they weren't homeowners but leaseholders, and sitting right in the front row, Karen's jaw dropped so far I thought it might hit the floor. The room buzzed with panic, but I calmed them, explaining I had no intention of uprooting anyone, that life would go on as usual, except for one change. The law was dissolved effective immediately, and anyone enforcing Karen's petty rules would answer directly to me. The cheers that followed shook the rafters, neighbors hugging, relieved, while Karen sat frozen, pale as chalk, realizing her empire of lawn citations and barking dog fines had crumbled in seconds. But just when she thought it was over, I added one last twist. I announced that all law fines collected over the past 5 years would be refunded, and since Karen had personally pocketed a portion as administrative fees, she now owed tens of thousands of dollars, payable within 30 days, or her property rights, or rather, her lease, would be terminated. The room erupted again, half laughter, half outrage, as Karen bolted for the door, tears streaking her face, and in that moment, the mountain town felt free again, unshackled from the tyranny of a woman who thought she could bend everyone to her will. And me, I returned to my cabin, lit a fire, and poured a drink, smiling as I watched the stars rise over land that had always been mine, knowing that sometimes the best justice is letting people trap themselves with their own arrogance, because in the end, Karen had called 911 on the one man she could never defeat, and the irony of that was worth more than all the timber, minerals, and land combined.